Welcome to part 2 of Rusty vs. Dale and Mark, which will cover the 1993 championship battle. The 1992 championship battle is legendary, so 1993 had a tough act to follow. Everyone still talks about that final race of the season at Atlanta. 6 drivers in contention for the championship, and 3 with very good chances, and it came down to the final lap. It was also Richard Petty's last race. And although not a lot of hype at the time, it was Jeff Gordon's first race. But what do people remember about 1993? Of course, we remember the tragic losses of Davey Allison and defending champion Alan Kulwicki. But on track, we remember Dale Jarrett's Daytona 500 victory with his father Ned on the call. We remember Rusty Wallace's wild flips at Daytona and Talladega. And of course, Jeff Gordon's amazing rookie stash. The dominance of 1993's top drivers, something you didn't see as much in 1992, and momentum shifts during the season made it intriguing and entertaining throughout. So let's get into part 2, the 1993 Cup Series Championship Chase. '92 was a rough one for both Dale and Rusty. Dale finished 12th in points and Rusty 13th. To put that in perspective, Dale finished top 10 in points every year from 1983 to 2000, except 1992. Rusty finished top 10 in points every year from 1986 to 2002, except 1992. Over those combined 35 years, they finished outside the top 10 just twice, both in 1992. They were both able to find victory lane though, winning one race apiece. For 1993, both had reason for optimism. Dale had just gotten a new crew chief in the offseason, in Andy Petrie, who led Harry Gant to consecutive 4th place points finishes in 1991 and 1992. Rusty had gone through a crew chief change during the 1992 season, with Buddy Parrott taking over in August. After the change, Rusty won a race and gained 4 points positions. Mark had a solid 1992 and was one of the 6 contenders for the championship heading to the season's finale at Atlanta, finishing 6th in points with 2 wins. Over the final 18 races of 1992, he actually scored the second most points in the series behind Kyle Petty, who also closed the season strong. With that type of finish to the season, and Steve Meal entering his second year as crew chief for Mark in 1993, expectations were high that they'd compete for a championship once again. Daytona was a massive disappointment for both Rusty and Dale, but for completely different reasons, with Dale finishing second after leading the most laps, but losing the lead on the last lap to eventual winner Dale Jarrett. And while I'm not focusing on Jarrett in this video, he and his team had a great season, finishing 4th in points in Coach Joe Gibbs' second season as owner.
A while ago we saw Jarrett and Earnhardt were capable of pull away a little bit. They're trying to bring it in.
Trouble behind. Rusty Wallace is turning over.
Rusty Wallace 20 feet in the air, spinning, crashing.
Well, I'll tell you, when they're running that close together and jockeying around position, you just know that things like this are going to happen.
Rusty was running well until he got caught up in someone else's mess, getting hit in just the wrong spot to send him tumbling end over end and then barrel rolling down the backstretch, resulting in a P32 finish. Mark would kick off the year with a good run, finishing P6. The next race at Rockingham would be a sign of things to come, with Rusty and Dale finishing 1st and 2nd, which they'd do 4 more times throughout the season. Rusty didn't lead until lap 275, but from there he dominated, leading 203 of the final 218 laps. With his second straight second-place finish, Dale was already leading the points. Mark would have another solid run, winning the pole, leading laps, and finishing P5. The next 2 races, while not heavily contributing to the championship battle, were won by 2 drivers achieving their final career victories. At Richmond, Davey Allison took the checkered flag for the final time, with our 3 title contenders all finishing in the top 10. Rusty ran P2, while Mark and Dale both continued their streak of finishing top 10 every race to start the season by finishing P7 and P10 respectively. Richmond was also the only race all season none of those 3 led laps. After a week delay due to the blizzard of the century in Atlanta, Morgan Shepherd would claim his final victory, which would also be the last victory for the Wood brothers until 2001. This was one of the races in my 10 races Mark Martin should have won video, and he dominated early and looked to be on his way to victory when an engine failure ended his day, dragging him down to a P32 finish. Rusty was strong all day, finishing P3, and Dale's top 10 streak also ended with a P11 finish, although he regained the points lead from Dale Jarrett. At Darlington, Dale took his first checkered flag of the season over Mark, who finished second. Rusty was also in the top 5 with a 5th place run. All 3 drivers started off the 1993 campaign with more points after 5 races than they had in 1989, and all 3 were positioned in the top 5, so nobody really had to play catch-up at this point in the season. Before the Bristol race, we lost defending champion Alan Kowicki in a plane crash. And after Rusty dominated the race, leading 376 laps, and won, he pulled out a Polish victory lap, which would become a constant for his victories, in tribute to Alan. Dale finished P2 and Mark P8. North Wilkesboro would be the first big slip for Dale on the season, finishing just P16 after dealing with an ill-handling car all day. The finish would cost him the points lead, as Rusty continued his hot start to the season, picking up his 2nd straight win and 3rd on the year. Mark ran into more bad luck, as he was caught up in a crash that started among the frontrunners on just lap 1. He was right behind Rusty when he got drilled in the side, and while he finished the race, only came home P31. Rusty would take his 3rd straight win at Martinsville, another dominating performance, leading 409 laps and extending his points lead because Dale had more issues. Running second to Rusty about 2/3 of the way through the race, Dale started having engine issues and dropped back, eventually pulling behind the wall after limping around for well over 100 laps and finishing P22. Mark was running near the back half of the top 10 when a poorly timed pit stop before a caution cost him a couple laps. It didn't result in him losing a ton of positions, but he ended up P10 when it could have been a bit better. After Daytona, Rusty had reeled off 7 consecutive top 5 finishes with 4 wins, including 3 in a row at Bristol, North Wilkesboro, and Martinsville. He was dominant in those wins as well, and after just 8 races, had already led 1,179 laps. Talladega would prove to be a major turning point in the championship battle. Surprisingly, Rusty fought up front with Dale and Mark all race long in his quest for 4 in a row, but on the chaotic final restart, they all got shuffled back.
They come through the tri-oval, checkered is waving, Ernie Irvin wins and Rusty spins and gets airborne and flips wildly right at the start-finish line, very reminiscent of his accident at Daytona.
Coming to the checkered flag, Dale got into the back of Rusty, and we've all seen the pictures before. Rusty went airborne in another terrifying wreck, but this time, it resulted in a broken left wrist. Mark had fallen back even further, finishing P12. While there wasn't much change in the top 2 in points with Dale finishing P4 and Rusty P6, the next few races would be tough for Rusty. Dale had a huge weekend at Sonoma, despite not even finishing in the top 5 in a race he could or should have won.
Green comes on lap number 53. We've got 21 more laps to go. Oh, and Kendall spins right in front. Oh, and collects Earnhardt. Can you believe that?
He won the pole, led the most laps, and finished P6, but he was caught up in someone else's mess on a late restart, fell back, and had to rally. Rusty, with his left wrist braced, was also running well in the top 5 when he had transmission issues, which relegated him to a P38 finish. Mark would have engine issues and drop out right after Dale got his damage and finished P40. With the massive swing in points, Dale regained the lead. Charlotte would be another big weekend for Dale, winning the Coca-Cola 600 after being penalized a lap late for intentionally causing a caution. Rusty and Mark both ran decent, but didn't finish where they ran. Rusty got some damage after getting loose under Bill Elliott off turn 2 and getting into the wall. I've heard Rusty claim he would have been able to save the car if he didn't have the wrist brace, so take that for a what-if scenario. Eventually, the damage or changes the team made to the car to fix it caused a tire to go down and sent Rusty into the wall, ending his day in P29. Mark had another engine failure late in the race and finished one spot ahead of Rusty in P28. That put Mark back to 12th in points and nearly 400 points behind Dale. In just 2 races with the broken wrist, Rusty had lost 215 points to Dale. Dover would see more of the same, as Dale picked up his 3rd win of the year. Mark would also rebound to finish P4.
Just in the last few minutes, the track has got shaded. Oh, there we go, right up underside Rusty.
Oh, man. Oh,
both of them.
Rusty cracks the wall hard. Keeps it down to the bottom of the racetrack. And Jimmy actually slides into the driver's door of Wallace's car, and Jeff Bodine piles in.
Oh, hopefully Rusty got that hand out of that thing. I'm telling you.
But the big moment of the race came on lap 425 when Mark tried to pass Rusty for 2nd, got loose, got into Rusty, and Rusty pounded the turn 4 wall, then took 2 more shots to the driver's side door. With the broken wrist, it was a pretty scary crash, but physically he was fine, although his championship hopes were bruised. On the plus side, with the attrition we typically see at Dover and the crash occurring late in the race, he still managed to finish P21. At Pocono, Rusty would have another horrible finish, losing an engine after just 4 laps, finishing P39. He didn't finish last though, as he beat Graham Taylor by a lap, whose reason for being out of the race was just quit. Mark would suffer another engine failure running 3rd just before the race's halfway point, finishing P31. Dale would finish just P11, but extended his points lead as Rusty fell from 2nd to 5th in the standings. Over that 4-race span, Dale would end up gaining 384 points on Rusty and put him in a great position to claim a 6th championship. Mark dominated Michigan, and if the race came down to speed, he'd have easily won.
After you've gone past that pit entrance,
I believe he's out.
I just run out of fuel.
Ran out of fuel going down the back straightaway. Just at the place you sit there, coming off through the front straightaway, ran out.
However, it ended up being a fuel mileage race, and Mark ran out with about 8 laps to go and dropped to P6 after leading 141 laps. Rusty fought back for a P5, while Dale ended up P14, the first time since Martinsville that Rusty gained points on Dale. Dale would pick up victory number 4 at Daytona, while Mark would have a solid P6. Rusty couldn't duplicate his performance from Talladega earlier in the year, and his plate track struggles continued, finishing P18. Although, it was the first plate race of the year he didn't flip, so he's got that going for him, which is nice. The inaugural Cup Series race at New Hampshire saw Rusty take his series-leading 5th win of the season with Mark right behind him in P2. The points race tightened up just a bit since Dale had multiple issues, including a slow pit stop early on that cost him a lap, and a spin into the backstretch infield off Sterling Marlin's bumper that cost him time as no caution came out. Dale would end up P26. Pocono would be the first race after we lost Davey Allison in a helicopter crash just days earlier. Dale ended up winning the race with Rusty 2nd. Mark had mechanical issues early and recovered to finish P13, but it seemed like every other race he had to deal with his car falling apart. The summer Talladega race is typically mentioned as being an underrated classic, with several memorable moments. Jimmy Horton clearing the wall is remembered well, but many forget that Stanley Smith suffered and survived a basilar skull fracture in the same crash. Neil Bonnet took a wild ride in his first race since 1990, and then joined the broadcast team for the remainder of the race.
Here they come. Urban on the inside.
The shortcut on the inside is going to be of some help.
As they come to the line, dead even. Looks like the 3.
I think Earnhardt won the race.
The end of the race saw Dale and Ernie Irvan duel for the win, with Dale coming out on top by just 0.005 of a second, in what would be the closest margin of victory in the electronic scoring era for quite a while. Mark would finish P3, and Rusty would struggle on a plate track once again, finishing P17. Overall, through this 5-race stretch, Dale would gain 35 points on Rusty, but lose 18 to Mark. It seemed like the results had kind of evened out, and it looked like Dale would be unchallenged the rest of the year. Mark Martin had struggled to find consistency the first part of the year, finding himself back in 12th in points after the first Pocono race. While he didn't win, he had improved to 5th in points by the time the series got to the Glen. And what a wild end to the race we got with this one. Mark had the car to beat most of the race, but had a bad pit stop under caution late. Rusty and Dale were both running near the front. Rusty fell back on the penultimate restart as he was on just 7 cylinders, and he'd finish P19. On that same restart, Mark was 11th, but moved his way to 3rd with 6 laps to go.
Oh, and then Dale Earnhardt and Kyle Petty have crashed. Mark is in the lead. Here is a replay of what happened. Now they're coming up through the S's here.
Kyle gets the car out of shape.
Oh, yeah.
All by himself, he spins Earnhardt, he comes back across, and Earnhardt nails it.
I think Earnhardt thought Kyle was going to spin back across the track, and he made that commitment to go on the outside there, and Kyle stayed out there.
Dale was second when leader Kyle Petty touched the curb through the S's and spun, and Dale had nowhere to go, and the 2 leaders were out. Mark moved through the chaos to take the lead and hold on to win, while Dale would finish just ahead of Rusty in P18. Mark finally had some good luck, but of course it happened just laps after bad luck. Mark would redeem himself at Michigan by taking his 2nd straight win after the tough loss earlier in the season. Generally, it was a pretty uneventful race for these 3 contenders, as Rusty ran well and finished P6 and Dale P9, although Dale did lose a lap around lap 140 when he had a flat tire while running 2nd and pitted right before a caution came out. He eventually made up the lap, but could only get back to 9th. The one and only 1-2-3 finish for the trio in 1993 happened at Bristol. Rusty dominated, leading 409 laps, but with 13 laps to go, Mark got around him and hung on for his 3rd straight win. Rusty would finish P2 and Dale P3. After a poor finish knocked Dale Jarrett from his 2nd place points position, our trio was now 1-2-3 in points for the first time this season. Mark would need to deal with rain delays and darkness if he wanted to win his 4th straight race. After a late caution, it was declared that they'd have a 10-lap shootout with darkness approaching, cutting the Southern 500 at Darlington short by 16 laps. Mark pulled away and captured that 4th straight win, but while Dale was battling Brett Bodine for 2nd, got into the wall and dropped to P4, which is where he finished. And it allowed Rusty to finish P3 and gain points on Dale. Being 304 points behind with just 8 races remaining would seem like a nearly impossible task for Rusty to overcome. However, just the previous year, Alan Kulwicki would come back from 278 points behind in just 6 races, so anything was possible. With his 4 straight victories, Mark had climbed to within 3 points of Rusty. Going for his 5th straight win at Richmond, Mark led a lot of the middle portion of the race, but faded later on and finished P6. Rusty would end up leading over half the race and take another victory, kicking off another batch of late season wins. Dale would finish P3, which is exactly the kind of consistency he needed as to not lose big chunks of points to his rivals. Dover was quite a ride for our contenders, with Mark being the first to have issues, losing a tire and pounding the wall, leading to the car catching fire. Before it stopped, Mark was hanging out the window and out of the car, a good sign that he was okay from the big hit. He'd finished just P31. Rusty led a big chunk of the early laps, but an unscheduled pit stop just after halfway put him 2 laps down. He got 1 back, but then one of the ugliest restarts you'll ever see happened. Rusty got into the back of Hut Strickland, who looked to have missed a shift or something to cause smoke to come from the pipes, and triggered a big crash that took out Dale and led to a P27 finish for him. Eventually, Rusty got his other lap back and came back to win, picking up a career-high 7th win on the season. At Martinsville, Mark would run into issues extremely early again through no fault of his own. On lap 3, another crash in front of him gave Mark enough damage that it affected the rest of his day. He would struggle and finish just P16 while he dealt with the effects of a damaged car. Dale was running top 5 late in the race when a rear end issue put him out and he finished P26. Rusty was strong, finishing P2, but didn't have much for Ernie Irvan, who dominated, leading 402 laps and winning the number 28 team's first race since Davey Allison back in the spring at Richmond. With 5 races left, Rusty had cut that massive points gap down to just 82 points. At North Wilkesboro, Mark ran into issues before he even crossed the start-finish line on the initial start of the race. A slow start caused the whole field to check up and Mark got hit in the rear, damaging his car and causing issues all day. This is the 3rd race of the season he had damage by lap 3 that he couldn't fully recover from. He ended the day P16, and at 350 points behind with just 4 races left, his title hopes were all but over. That's because Rusty and Dale finished 1st and 2nd again, as Rusty dominated another short track race and cut Dale's lead to 72 points. I want to touch on Rusty's short track performance in 1993. Of the 8 short track races, he won 5 times and had 3 second place finishes. And it wasn't just the finishes, but the number of laps he led. Of the 3,600 total laps raced at short tracks, he led 1,762, or 49%, which is an average of about 220 per race. At Charlotte, nobody had anything for Ernie Irvan, who absolutely dominated, leading 328 of the 334 laps and easily won the race. The domination at both Martinsville and Charlotte were a sign of things to come in 1994 for Ernie and the number 28 team. Our 3 contenders finished 2, 3, 4 behind Ernie, with Mark P2, Dale P3, and Rusty P4. Dale led laps, but Rusty didn't, pushing his points lead back to 82. Rusty and Dale finished right next to each other again at Rockingham, with Rusty picking up win number 9 on the season with Dale P2, and with Rusty leading the most laps, he trimmed Dale's points lead back to 72. Mark finished P5 to solidify his hold on 3rd in the standings. We just talked about Rusty's short track numbers for 1993, and now that Rockingham is back and remeasured to be under a mile, it's technically a short track, even though it's the same track as it was back then. Does that mean we can say Rusty had 2 more short track wins in 1993 to bring his total to 7 wins and 3 second place finishes in the 10 short track races? Heading to the penultimate race at Phoenix, Rusty needed to trim Dale's lead to have a legitimate shot at Atlanta. Mark picked up his 5th win of the season in dominating fashion. But Rusty, despite running well the first half of the race, suffered a broken sway bar mount and ended up P19. Dale finished P4, and it put Rusty 126 points behind and all but ended his championship chase. Dale came into Atlanta needing just a 34th place finish to clinch the championship. With the attrition, this was guaranteed just after the race's 1/3 mark, and Dale won his 6th championship. Rusty would dominate and go on to hit double-digit wins for the first time in the Cup Series since Dale Earnhardt in 1987. Mark would finish just P20, and Dale would finish P10 to put the final tally at 80 points over Rusty.
Good Lord looked after us all year, and the crew did a great job. I just can't say enough about them. We got to going for it after we had it locked up, and I got in trouble and got loose and got in the sack and knocked the side on the car. It really hurt the aerodynamics, but we had a shot, I think, at running with them, being one of the contenders. But that's racing, and we'll take that championship.
One of the big contributing factors in the championship battle was Dale's dominance at the 4 restrictor plate races. Dale scored 277 more points than Rusty in just those races, a massive swing in points that made Rusty play catch-up. And Rusty's only top 15 finish in those races? The one in which he flew over the line in the air at Talladega for a P6. All 3 contenders' teams stayed largely intact for the following season, although Rusty's Penske Racing team switched from Pontiac to Ford. The 1994 season was more of the same from all 3, although Rusty and Mark weren't able to really make it much of a championship battle, and they once again finished behind Dale in another 1-2-3 points finish for the trio. Ernie Irvan, who closed the 1993 season strong, was Dale's top competition until he suffered life-threatening injuries in a practice crash at Michigan in August. Despite Rusty winning 8 races, Dale just about coasted to his record-tying 7th championship after Ernie's injuries, clinching the title a race early, and for all intents and purposes, had it wrapped up 2 races early as he just needed to start the Rockingham and Atlanta races. 1989 and 1993 had big momentum swings throughout, giving us unpredictable championship battles. Today's championship structure doesn't give us the race-to-race grind that we used to have. We could have easily had different champions in both of these seasons. Please leave your favorite 1993 moments in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and check out the rest of my channel for more classic NASCAR content.